I was returning from a business trip, then my wife sent one chilling text, "Don't go home tonight." The plane touched down just as the evening sky was bruising into shades of deep purple and orange. After a week of business meetings, tight deadlines, and hotel room solitude, I was eager to return home, to the quiet hum of our apartment and the familiar comfort of her presence. My bag bounced lightly against my shoulder as I wheeled my suitcase through the airport, the low murmur of travelers and the occasional sharp echo of rolling trolleys filling the terminal. Then my phone buzzed. I almost didn't notice it in the chaos of arrivals, but the vibration felt insistent, like a tremor through my hand. Pulling it out, I saw her name flashing on the screen, "Don't go home tonight." For a second, my mind froze. The words were so stark, so unlike her usual warm, teasing messages. My thumb hovered over the screen as I reread it. No explanation. No smiley face, no playful punctuation. Just the text itself, simple yet loaded with an unsettling weight. I felt the first prickling of anxiety in my chest, a tightness that made it hard to breathe normally. The airport suddenly felt too loud. The chatter around me faded into background noise, replaced by the roar of questions spinning in my mind. Why? Was she upset? Did something happen at home? Or was this something worse? I could practically feel her absence pressing against me, the empty space where her laughter and small touches normally were. I leaned against a polished steel column, trying to steady myself, my fingers brushing over the screen as if the touch might give me a clue. The light of my phone illuminated my face, showing a mix of confusion, worry, and a sudden, gnawing fear. I thought about the times she would greet me at the door with a hug, how her hand would brush mine as we walked from the car to the apartment. That comfort, which I had taken for granted over the past week, suddenly felt achingly distant. I glanced around at the bustling crowd, the bright advertisements, the families reuniting, the laughter and casual chatter, and felt like I was in a bubble of dissonance. Everything else seemed normal, but this message had pulled me into an undercurrent of tension I couldn't ignore. I replayed our last phone call before the trip, searching for hints I might have missed. Had she sounded off? Was there something unspoken? Even the little things, the distant hum of the escalators, the smell of roasted coffee from a nearby cafe, the soft squeak of luggage wheels, felt amplified, almost intrusive, as if the world itself was reminding me of the strangeness of this moment. I felt the urge to call her immediately, but a part of me hesitated, knowing that whatever was happening, I needed to approach it carefully, to understand before reacting. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and took a slow, deep breath. My heart was still racing, my palms clammy. The words, "Don't go home tonight," echoed in my mind, a chilling puzzle I had no way of solving yet. And in that moment, as I stepped toward the exit, the familiar anticipation of returning home was replaced with an unsettling knot of worry, and a silent, desperate hope that whatever was waiting for me, we could face it together. The airport was behind me, but the unease from that single text followed like a shadow. "Don't go home tonight." The words repeated in my mind with a rhythmic insistence, each replay tightening a coil of anxiety in my chest. I slid into the driver's seat of my car, the familiar leather scent usually comforting, now almost suffocating. The engine hummed to life, but the sound seemed distant, like a background track to the thoughts racing through my mind. I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles whitening, and stared at the highway ahead. The night stretched before me in long ribbons of asphalt, wet from a light drizzle that made the streetlights glimmer like scattered diamonds. Each passing car sent fleeting shadows across the dashboard, and for a moment, it felt as if the world had shifted into a strange, uncertain space, one where familiar things suddenly felt foreign. My thoughts drifted to her, the way she used to hum softly while cooking, the subtle brush of her fingers when she passed me in the kitchen, the warmth of her shoulder against mine during quiet evenings. I realized how much I had taken those small gestures for granted. Now, with the sudden void of her presence and that cryptic message, I felt the weight of absence as keenly as a physical ache. I considered calling her. My thumb hovered over her number, but each time I did, a wave of hesitation stopped me. What if I misunderstood? What if she was trying to protect me from something, and my intrusion only made things worse? The uncertainty gnawed at me, but it also made me long for her presence even more. I imagined her sitting in our living room, maybe pacing or staring out the window, waiting for me, or hiding something from me. The thought made my chest tighten. The road blurred in streaks of gold and white as headlights passed, and I found myself tapping my fingers on the steering wheel. The familiar rhythm, which usually calmed me, only reminded me how out of control I felt. I thought about where I could go instead. A friend's house. A quiet hotel. Anywhere but home. And yet, a stubborn pull kept me moving forward, an invisible tether to the apartment I had been expecting to return to. Every little sound in the car felt magnified, the subtle hum of the engine, the occasional squeak of the wipers, the faint scratch of tires on wet asphalt. I tried to steady my breathing, inhaling the faint scent of rain mixed with leather and my own cologne. It should have been grounding, but it wasn't. My mind kept circling back to her, to that single sentence, and to all the unspoken questions it raised. And then I realized something else. It wasn't just fear or confusion. It was longing. I missed her in a way I hadn't fully appreciated until this moment. I missed the simple intimacy of shared space, of small touches, of laughter echoing through the apartment. The thought of waiting, of having to respect her request without knowing why, made the night stretch even longer. As I drove through the city, past familiar streetlights and shuttered shops, a sense of helplessness settled over me. But beneath it, a stubborn hope remained, that whatever awaited me, we could face it together. The night was uncertain, yes, but so was every love worth keeping. The city felt quieter than usual as I parked my car outside a small, late-night cafe. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still slick and reflective, echoing the glow of the streetlights in long, trembling streaks. I stepped out, shoulders hunched, hands stuffed in my coat pockets, as though the fabric could somehow hold my anxiety together. I had reached a point where the knot in my chest was too heavy to carry alone. I needed someone to talk to, someone who could listen without judgment, someone who could help me untangle the sudden chaos in my mind. My friend, someone who had known me through highs and lows, was my anchor in times like this. The cafe's warm light spilled onto the sidewalk as I entered, and the smell of roasted coffee beans, sweet pastries, and a faint hint of vanilla wrapped around me like a temporary comfort. I spotted my friend at a corner table, nursing a cup of black coffee, and waved. Their face lit up, but I could already see the concern creeping in, the way they noticed the tension in my shoulders, the distracted gaze, the way my hands clutched the table as if trying to anchor myself. Sitting down, I forced a weak smile, but it barely masked the storm inside me. My friend noticed. "You look like you've seen a ghost," they said gently, their hand brushing mine briefly, a gesture meant to steady, to connect. That tiny touch, simple and human, made me realize how starved I was for any kind of reassurance, for even the smallest gesture of care. I took a slow sip of my coffee, the warmth spreading through my chest, and tried to explain. Not everything, I couldn't yet, but enough to let them know something was wrong. "She texted me tonight," I said, voice tight. "Just don't go home tonight." My friend listened quietly, nodding, letting the words hang between us. The hum of the cafe, the soft clinking of cups, the low murmur of other patrons, everything seemed to fade, leaving just the two of us and the weight of my confession. They asked careful questions, not intrusive, just enough to help me unpack my fear. I found myself describing the little details I hadn't realized I missed until now, her laugh echoing through the apartment, the way she leaned against me when we watched television, the small brush of her hand when she handed me a glass of water. I realized how much I relied on those simple gestures to feel grounded, and how their absence now made the uncertainty almost unbearable. The conversation didn't solve the mystery, but it gave me something almost as valuable, perspective and emotional relief. The act of speaking aloud, of letting someone else hold the tension with me, made the unknown feel slightly smaller, slightly less threatening. My friend's hand briefly brushed mine again as I prepared to leave, a silent reassurance that I wasn't facing this alone. Stepping back into the cool night air, the city still glimmering wet and reflective, I felt a mixture of clarity and unease. I still didn't know why she had sent the text, or what awaited me at home, but for the first time since I read it, I felt a little less trapped by my own spiraling thoughts. And somewhere deep inside, that faint pulse of hope, the desire to see her, to understand, to reconnect, burned a little stronger. The night had settled over the city like a velvet curtain, quiet but heavy, the kind of stillness that makes every small sound feel amplified. I wandered streets that were familiar, yet suddenly felt foreign. Each familiar storefront, every lamppost, seemed to mock the uncertainty gnawing at me. "Don't go home tonight." The words replayed endlessly in my mind, unyielding and impossible to shake. I didn't intend to discover anything tonight. I was just walking, trying to make sense of the tension, trying to untangle my own restless thoughts. But life has a way of nudging truths into your path when you least expect it. As I passed a small park I used to jog through with her, I noticed a figure slipping into the shadows near the benches. At first, I didn't recognize her, but then my heart skipped. There she was, my wife, speaking quietly with someone I didn't know. The sight hit me like cold water. I froze, pressed against the soft glow of a streetlight, every nerve on alert. I could hear snippets of her voice, low and cautious, yet strangely tender. My stomach twisted in confusion. Was this someone she had invited over? A friend? Or someone else? My mind raced through worst-case scenarios. The absence of her usual warmth, the sudden warning in the text, it all seemed to come together in a way I couldn't quite grasp. I wanted to step forward, to demand answers, but something held me back, a mix of respect, fear, and the unspoken understanding that confronting her this way could shatter more than just the moment. So I lingered at the edge of the park, watching silently, heart pounding. The way she gestured with her hands, the slight tilt of her head as she listened, even the faint crease of worry between her brows, all of it told a story I couldn't yet read. As I retreated down the sidewalk, my mind was a storm of conflicting emotions. Fear battled curiosity. Hurt battled longing. I realized how deeply I had taken her presence for granted, the comfort of knowing she was near, the subtle intimacies that went unnoticed until they were absent. The touch of her hand, the warmth of her shoulder against mine, the sound of her laughter, they all felt amplified now, memories I could almost feel like ghosts against my skin. And yet, beneath the anxiety, a stubborn pulse of hope remained. I didn't want to assume the worst. Maybe she was protecting me from something, or trying to handle a problem on her own. Perhaps the text wasn't a warning about betrayal, but a plea born of caution and care. That possibility, however faint, kept me from spiraling entirely. I walked the streets slowly, letting the cool night air wash over me, each step a mixture of tension and anticipation. I knew that soon I would have to confront the unknown, that clarity would come only when I faced her directly. And in that mixture of dread and longing, I realized something important: the bond between us was stronger than fear, deeper than uncertainty. Whatever awaited, the connection we shared had left its mark, and I could not ignore it, even in the shadows of doubt. The apartment building felt smaller somehow as I approached, the familiar hallway stretched and unfamiliar under the weight of my anticipation. The elevator hummed softly, carrying me upward, and with each floor, my chest tightened. I had imagined this moment countless times since reading her text, but the reality, the proximity, the silence, the pause before facing her, was far more suffocating than I'd expected. When I finally stood outside our door, I hesitated. My hand hovered over the doorknob, heart hammering in a rhythm that seemed to echo through the narrow hallway. I inhaled slowly, trying to steady myself, but my mind was a storm of possibilities, each one more unsettling than the last. Was she angry? Afraid? Or was there something I had never imagined? The door opened before I could knock. She stood there, framed by the soft, warm glow of the apartment lights. For a moment, we simply looked at each other, the silence stretching between us like a fragile bridge. Her eyes were wide, revealing vulnerability I hadn't seen in weeks, and yet her posture was poised, composed, as if she were trying to contain emotions that threatened to spill over. "I got your text," I said finally, voice low, almost a whisper, heavy with tension. "I need to know why." She stepped aside, gesturing me in. The apartment felt both intimate and strange, every familiar object suddenly charged with unspoken questions. She moved to the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of water, and I watched her. The small gestures, the tilt of her head, the way her fingers grazed the countertop, the gentle brush of hair behind her ear, made my chest ache. I realized how much I had missed these simple moments, how absent her presence had felt these past hours. We sat across from each other at the table, the air thick with hesitation. Her hands rested loosely on the table, fingers brushing against each other in small, nervous motions. I mirrored her posture, letting my hands linger near hers without quite touching, a subtle acknowledgement of the intimacy that still existed between us. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was soft, measured, but carried the weight of everything she had withheld. "I didn't want you to come home tonight because I wasn't ready to tell you," she said. Pause. "There's been something I've been handling alone." I leaned forward slightly, drawn by the honesty in her eyes. The room felt smaller now, charged with the electricity of suppressed emotions. "You don't have to do that alone," I whispered, the words tasting of desperation and care. "Whatever it is, we can face it together." Her gaze softened, and for the first time that night, the tension between us shifted toward relief. She reached across the table, fingertips brushing mine lightly, a small, tentative connection that said more than words ever could. My heart thudded, not from fear, but from recognition. We were still here, still connected, and the distance imposed by the text and the unknown was starting to dissolve. We talked for hours after that, each word deliberate, each pause heavy with meaning. Vulnerabilities surfaced, confessions emerged, and the silence between sentences became a language of its own. Every small gesture, a hand brushing against my arm, a slight lean toward me, the catch of her breath when she shared something personal, spoke of trust, longing, and the slow rekindling of closeness. By the time the night had deepened into quiet intimacy, the apartment no longer felt like a place of uncertainty. It was a space where honesty and connection had begun to rebuild what fear had threatened to break, and I realized that the true tension had never been about distance, it had been about the courage to face each other honestly, fully, and vulnerably. The tension that had clung to the apartment all evening began to soften, like sunlight breaking through heavy clouds. After hours of hesitant conversation, explanations, and shared vulnerabilities, a quiet settled between us. It wasn't just the absence of conflict, it was the presence of understanding, the mutual recognition that we had navigated the storm together. I leaned back slightly in my chair, noticing her across the table, the soft warm light painting her features in gentle shades of gold. Every detail struck me, the slight curve of her lips as she listened, the way her hands rested lightly on the table, the faint sigh that slipped from her chest as she finally allowed herself to relax. My own breathing slowed, mirroring the easing rhythm of hers. The apartment, once heavy with uncertainty, now felt like a sanctuary. We didn't rush toward grand gestures. The resolution wasn't dramatic or forced, it was in the small, human things, the way our hands brushed as I reached for my glass, the fleeting glance she gave me when our eyes met, the subtle shift in posture as she leaned just a little closer. Each motion carried the weight of reassurance, each unspoken acknowledgement reinforcing the bond we had almost forgotten in the chaos of fear and doubt. "I'm sorry for worrying you," she said quietly, the tremor in her voice betraying how much she had carried alone. "I didn't know how to tell you without. I don't know, scaring you." I reached across the table, letting my hand hover near hers before gently brushing our fingers together. The contact was light, but it spoke volumes: trust, reassurance, and the rediscovery of intimacy that didn't need words to exist. I needed to be with you," I admitted softly. "To understand. To be here." The small touch lingered, and with it came a flood of relief, of recognition that despite the fear and uncertainty, we had found our way back to each other. There was a profound quiet in that moment, a shared heartbeat that seemed louder than any words could ever be. I noticed her shoulder relax, the faint smile playing at her lips, the warmth in her eyes that I had missed more than I realized. We spent the rest of the evening in slow, deliberate reconnection. Sitting side by side on the couch, talking quietly about the day, brushing hands over shared mugs of tea, occasionally letting fingers linger together. Every laugh, every shared memory, every subtle brush of skin became a reaffirmation of our bond. There was no rush, no grandiose declarations, only the steady, grounding knowledge that we were together, that our connection had endured the strain and emerged deeper for it. Before the night ended, she rested her head lightly on my shoulder, a gesture both tender and intimate. I felt the warmth of her presence, the gentle rhythm of her breathing, and a sense of calm washed over me. In that quiet, ordinary moment, the fear and tension of the past hours melted away, leaving only the quiet, resilient intimacy between us. The apartment, once a space of uncertainty, now held the quiet promise of continuity, trust, and renewed closeness. I realized that emotional resolution wasn't about dramatic gestures, it was about honesty, shared vulnerability, and the slow, deliberate rebuilding of connection. And as I held her gently, I knew that despite the night's turmoil, we had found our way back to each other, ready to face whatever came next, together. The morning light seeped through the curtains in gentle slats, painting the apartment in soft gold. For the first time in what felt like days, the space felt truly familiar again, warm, safe, and alive with the quiet rhythm of shared life. I could hear her moving in the kitchen, the faint clink of dishes and the soft hum of her voice as she greeted the day. It was ordinary, mundane even, but after the tension and uncertainty of the previous night, it felt extraordinary. I padded across the living room in bare feet, feeling the cool touch of the wooden floor beneath me, and watched her. She stirred a pot on the stove, the gentle tilt of her head as she focused, the way her hair caught the sunlight, every small gesture felt intimate, a reminder of the countless little moments I had taken for granted. I realized how much I had missed this presence, the simple act of being near her without worry or fear. We shared breakfast in companionable silence, the occasional smile and shared glance carrying more meaning than words ever could. Our hands brushed accidentally as we reached for the sugar, and I lingered a moment longer than necessary, savoring the connection that had been frayed and now, slowly, was being restored. There was no urgency in our movements, only a steady, comforting rhythm of coexistence. Later, we moved through our usual routines together, tidying up, checking messages, walking through the apartment in sync. Each small interaction, the way she leaned slightly toward me while reading something aloud, the way I instinctively offered my hand to steady her as she reached for a high shelf, was charged with quiet reassurance. We were physically close without any need for overt gestures, our intimacy grounded in comfort, familiarity, and trust. I noticed new things about her, too, subtle shifts that spoke volumes about the vulnerability and honesty of the previous night. The gentle way she smiled when I teased her lightly, the softness in her voice when she asked about my day, the small lingering glance when she thought I wasn't looking. Every detail reinforced that the bond between us had grown stronger through the tension, not weaker. By evening, we settled on the couch together, leaning into the comfort of shared presence. Our fingers entwined naturally, a quiet rhythm of togetherness that needed no declaration. We laughed over small memories, shared thoughts about the week, and allowed ourselves to simply exist in the warmth of one another. It was in these ordinary moments, the brushing of hands, the shared space, the casual closeness, that the depth of our connection truly shone. As the night drew near, I felt a calm I hadn't known in days. The fear, the anxiety, the uncertainty, all had faded into the background, replaced with a deep, sustaining awareness of us, two people who had weathered a storm together and emerged closer for it. The apartment, once heavy with tension, now held the quiet promise of stability, intimacy, and mutual care. Before turning in for the night, she rested her head lightly on my shoulder, her breath warm against my neck. I wrapped my arm around her, holding her close, feeling the steady rhythm of her heartbeat. In that moment, I understood fully, love wasn't always about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. Sometimes, it was about presence, understanding, and the quiet reassurance that, no matter what challenges came, we had each other, and that was more than enough.